I didn't tell my brother's fiancée what I actually did for a living. Not at the engagement party, not when she asked politely over the charcuterie board, not even when she made that comment about tradespeople being a different kind of people. I just smiled, refilled my glass of Pinot Gris, and said I worked in construction, which was true, just not the whole truth. My name doesn't matter as much as what happened, but for context, I'm 31. I own a licensed electrical contracting company based out of Kelowna, British Columbia, and at the time of my brother's engagement party, we had 12 employees, 2 apprentices, and more work booked than we could comfortably handle through the following spring. We'd just signed a contract with a commercial developer out of Vancouver, one of the bigger jobs we'd ever taken on, and I had driven 6 hours to be at that party with a gift-wrapped KitchenAid and a smile. Nobody in my family knew any of that. They knew I was an electrician. They'd known that since I was 22 and chose to register in the apprenticeship program, instead of applying to university like my brother had. My mother had cried, not the proud kind of crying, the other kind. "You're so smart," she'd said, like that was the problem. My brother, I'll call him my brother because that's all he is to me now, went to the University of Victoria, got a business degree, and now works in commercial lending at a bank in Calgary. He wears collared shirts every day. He plays golf. He once described my work to someone at a family dinner as she fixes wires and things. He didn't say it cruelly. That was the part that used to get me. He genuinely thought that was what I did. For years I let it go. I went to the dinners. I answered the questions about how's work with short answers because nobody was really asking. I watched my parents ask my brother about his RRSP contributions and his performance reviews, and whether the bank was sending him to the conference in Banff. They asked me if I was being careful on job sites. I was building a company. They were worried I might trip over something. The engagement party was in October at my parents' house in Penticton. My brother had been with his fiancée, I'll call her his fiancée because that's what she was, for about 8 months. She was polished in a way that felt deliberate. Good shoes, the kind of neutral-toned blouse that costs $300 but looks like it cost $30. She worked in interior design, high-end residential, and she had opinions about everything in my parents' living room, delivered as compliments, with just enough edge to let you know they were also critiques. She was perfectly pleasant to me until she found out what I did. "Oh," she said. "So like residential stuff?" "Commercial, mostly," I said. "Some residential. My dad always says finding a good electrician is impossible." She laughed a little. "Like, we had one do our place in Kelowna, and he left a hole in the drywall for 3 weeks. "That's frustrating," I said. "It's just such a different world, you know, tradespeople." She said it the way some people say bless your heart. Not mean, just separate. Like she was describing a species she'd read about but never quite encountered in the wild. I smiled and moved on. What I didn't say, I knew who she was, not her personally, but I knew her business. She ran a boutique interior design studio. I'd looked her up after my brother mentioned her name, and I had seen her firm listed as a subcontractor on 2 different builds that my company had been in contact with over the past year. Her world and my world were closer than she thought. They were practically touching. I didn't say anything. I drove back to Kelowna that night, thinking about it. The dark highway through the valley, the radio low, my coffee going cold in the cup holder. I wasn't angry. I was tired in a way that doesn't really go away. The wedding invitation came in January. Or rather, the not invitation came in January. My mother called on a Sunday afternoon. I was at my desk going over a quote for a medical clinic renovation, about $340,000 in electrical work, permits and materials, and I almost didn't answer because I was in the middle of something. I answered. "I need to talk to you about the wedding," she said. She sounded careful, like she'd rehearsed it. The wedding was in late June. Outdoor ceremony at a vineyard in the South Okanagan. Dinner reception in the main hall. Very beautiful, from what I'd heard. My brother and his fiancée had been planning it since December. "There's been a conversation," my mother said, "about the guest list." I waited. Your brother and she's very focused on the aesthetic of everything, you know how she is, and she's worried about. My mother paused. She mentioned that some of the photos might look a certain way if, look, she said something about not wanting the guests to be. She used the word mismatched. I still didn't say anything. She's worried your work clothes. I know you don't wear them to events, I told her that, but she's concerned that you'd talk about your job and it might not fit with the image they're going for. She doesn't want me at the wedding, I said. It's not that she doesn't want you. Mom. Silence. She's worried about the optics, my mother said finally. Your brother agreed to ask if you'd consider just attending the dinner portion, not the ceremony, less photos. I was quiet for a long time. Outside my window, the bare vineyard rows ran down the hill toward the lake. January in Kelowna is grey and still, and the silence is very loud. I understand, I said. You're not upset? I'm fine, I said. Tell him I won't come. She tried to walk it back then, said I was misunderstanding, said it wasn't meant that way. I said it was fine, truly, and that I hoped they had a wonderful day, and that I had to get back to work. I hung up and sat there for a minute. Then I went back to the quote. I didn't call back that week. I didn't text my brother. I didn't post anything on social media, didn't talk about it with friends, didn't write a long message I would regret sending. I just worked. February was busy. We picked up a new commercial contract with a hotel renovation company out of Kamloops. I hired another apprentice, a young woman fresh out of the Okanagan College Trades program, and we moved into a slightly larger shop space on the edge of the industrial park. I started working with a bookkeeper to restructure how we were tracking job costs because we'd grown past the point where a spreadsheet was sufficient. In March, I got a call from a project coordinator named, well, I'll call her the coordinator, because what matters isn't her name but what she told me. She was working on a new boutique vineyard event venue on the Naramata Bench. High-end, the developer wanted everything done right. Radiant in-floor heating in the hall, full lighting design for the ceremony terrace, custom outdoor lanterns hardwired along the orchard path, a show kitchen for the caterers. It was the kind of project that shows up in architecture magazines. The electrical tender was out. I didn't submit a bid. I didn't put it together immediately. I want to be honest about that. The venue project was one of 4 active contracts at the time, and I was managing a lot of moving parts. The venue had a name, a French name, something about the light, and I knew it was on the Naramata Bench, which is a 30-minute drive from Penticton. It wasn't until my site supervisor mentioned, almost as an aside, that the interior design firm on the project had done a walkthrough and left a whole binder of specifications for the lighting placement that I started paying attention. Who's the interior firm? I asked. I sat with that for a moment. It was her studio. My brother's fiancée's studio. She was the interior designer on the venue we were wiring. I didn't say anything to my site supervisor. I went back to my truck and pulled up the project file on my laptop. Sure enough, her name was on the design documents. Not in a minor role, she was the lead designer. This was her project as much as it was ours. Here's the thing about commercial construction in a mid-sized market. It's small. Kelowna, Penticton, Vernon. Everybody knows somebody who knows somebody. The electrical contractor and the interior designer often end up in the same meetings. Especially on a project this detailed, where lighting placement and fixture specifications had to be coordinated exactly between our team and hers. I had a site coordination meeting scheduled for the first week of May. I thought about sending one of my project managers. I do that sometimes. They're capable. They handle client-facing meetings regularly. There was no reason for me to go personally. I went personally. The meeting was at the venue site on a Tuesday morning, cloudy but dry, the kind of spring day in the Okanagan where you can smell the earth turning. I wore what I always wear to site meetings, clean work pants, my company jacket with the logo on the chest, steel-toed boots that I actually clean. I had my project binder and my site drawings and a coffee from the Tim Hortons drive-through on the way up. There were about 8 people in the room: the developer, the general contractor's project manager, the landscapes architect, 2 people from the catering company, a structural consultant, and her. She was looking at the lighting layout on the east wall when I walked in. She turned when the door opened. The moment she recognized me took about 3 seconds. I watched it happen. The polite smile that was already forming, the professional greeting that was already rising to her lips, and then the adjustment, the recalibration. The quick look at the logo on my jacket, then back at my face. "Hi," I said. "I'm the principal of," and I named my company. She said my name like it was a question. "That's me," I said. There was a short silence that probably only I noticed. "I didn't realize," she said. "It's a good project," I said. "The lighting design is detailed, we're looking forward to it." And then we sat down and had a 2-hour site coordination meeting, professional and thorough, because that's what the project required. She was good at her job. I'll say that honestly. Her specifications were precise, her fixture selections were well researched. And when she pushed back on my suggested placement for the outdoor lanterns along the orchard path, she had a legitimate design reason that I acknowledged was worth accommodating. At the end of the meeting, she asked if she could speak with me privately for a moment. Everyone else filtered out. We stood near the window that looked out over the terrace, the bare vines below us beginning to show the first pale green of spring. "I owe you an apology," she said. She didn't hedge it, I'll give her that. "The engagement party," she said. "What I said about tradespeople. You didn't know who I was," I said. "That's not really an excuse. I didn't disagree with her." "And the wedding," she said. "The guest list. I know you said you wouldn't come. I want you to know that wasn't." She stopped. Tried again. "I was building something in my head about what the day was supposed to look like, and I made you into a piece of a picture instead of a person. I'm sorry." I looked out the window for a moment. The lake was visible in the distance, silver grey under the cloud cover. "I appreciate that," I said. "Is there any chance?" She started. "Honestly," I said, "I think the best thing right now is that we keep this professional. The project is going to require a lot of coordination, and I'd rather that be clean." She nodded. "When it's done," I said, "maybe we talked. But right now, this is work." She said she understood. We shook hands. I drove back down the bench with the window cracked, the cold Okanagan air coming in, and I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that too. I felt something quieter than triumph, something more like resolution. The project took until late May. We came in on schedule. The day we completed the final inspection and handed off the documentation to the developer, my site supervisor cracked open a thermos of coffee, and we stood on the ceremony terrace looking out over the vineyard. "Nice one," he said. "Yeah," I said. The venue was beautiful. The lighting along the orchard path sat exactly where she'd wanted it, warm and low and precise. The chandelier in the main hall, a custom piece, £1,200, required its own structural support, was centered perfectly over the dance floor. My brother's wedding was 3 weeks later. He called me the week before. "I heard you're working on the venue," he said. It wasn't quite an accusation, but it wasn't far off. "We did the electrical," I said. A pause. "Why didn't you say something? You didn't ask what I was working on," I said. "You never really do." He was quiet for a moment. "That's not." He stopped. "Okay, maybe that's fair." "It's fine," I said. "It's not fine. The wedding thing. I know." She told me what she said at the engagement party. The tradespeople comment. "It happens," I said. "It really does. I'm not carrying it." "You could come," he said. "To the wedding. We want you there." I thought about it. I honestly thought about it. "Send me the ceremony time," I said. "I'll be there for the whole thing." He let out a breath. I didn't realize until that moment that he'd been holding it. I wore a dark green dress and block heels that I'd bought in February, when I still thought I wasn't going. The vineyard was stunning in the June evening light, the mountains cutting the sky behind the terrace, the string lights I'd helped design the circuitry for glowing amber along the orchard path. I sat in the second row on the groom's side, because that's where family sits, and I am still his family, even when it's complicated. During the reception, the developer who'd hired us found me at the bar. He shook my hand and said the electrical team had been the easiest contractor he'd worked with all year, which is the kind of compliment in commercial construction that means more than it sounds. My mother saw that. She was standing near enough to hear. Later, after the speeches and the first dance and the dessert table, with the little Nanaimo bar bites, my mother found me on the terrace. I didn't know, she said. I know you didn't. Why didn't you ever say anything? About the company? About how things were going? I thought about all the Sunday phone calls, the how's work with no follow-up, the retirement savings questions directed at my brother. The assumption that being careful on a job site was the most relevant thing to ask me about. You didn't ask, I said. She was quiet, the string lights were on behind her, the lake dark below the hill. I'm asking now, So I told her. About the company, the contracts, the apprentices. About the medical clinic renovation and the hotel in Kamloops and the $340,000 quote that had landed while she was calling to tell me not to come to her son's wedding in my work clothes. About the 12 employees who showed up every morning and the apprentice who had just passed her third-year exams. About how I'd been afraid every year for the first 3 years and then one morning I wasn't. Not because things got easier, but because I'd gotten better. She cried. Not the other kind this time. We stayed on that terrace for a long time. The party moved inside, and the DJ started up, and we stood there while the lights came on in the valley below us, the town lights, and the vineyard lights, and the lights along the dock where someone's boat was still tied up in the dark water. I'm proud of you, she said. I'd waited 10 years to hear that. I'm not embarrassed to say it. I know, Mom, I said. I know. We went inside. My brother was on the dance floor, doing a terrible impression of someone who knows how to dance. His wife caught my eye across the room and gave me a look that was something like a peace offering, something like genuine. I gave her a small nod back. I wasn't ready to call us friends. Maybe we would be eventually. Maybe we'd be colleagues first and see where that went. The valley has a lot of development happening. Interior design and electrical contracting cross paths more often than people think. But that night I just danced. The drive back to Kelowna was 2 hours, the highway dark and quiet, the stars very clear above the valley. I had 3 texts from my site supervisor with questions about our next job, a new mixed-use building near the waterfront, the biggest contract we'd ever signed. I'd answer them in the morning. I drove with the window cracked and the radio low, and somewhere past the lights of Summerland, I realised I hadn't thought about the engagement party in weeks. That's the thing about quiet. It takes a while to set in. But once it does, it's solid. It holds.